One was a Hungarian countess accused of bathing in the blood of young women to preserve her beauty. The other was a Catholic Queen of England who burned almost 300 Protestants alive in 5 years. Both were powerful women in centuries that gave women almost no power at all. Both have names that became myths. Both still divide historians on what they actually did. Tonight, Elizabeth Báthory and Queen Mary I of England. The two most notorious women of European history. Two completely different forms of cruelty. One question: who was truly more dangerous? Welcome back to Evil vs. Evil, Monsters of History. This is episode 17. Born in near Báthory, Hungary, in 1560, Elizabeth Báthory came into the world at the absolute peak of one of the most powerful aristocratic families in Eastern Europe. The Báthorys had produced cardinals, generals, princes, and one king of Poland. They owned vast estates across modern-day Hungary, Slovakia, and Romania. They were also, by reputation, the most inbred and most violent noble family in Central Europe. Her uncle Stephen was the king of Poland. Her cousin Sigismund was the Prince of Transylvania and was eventually deposed for cruelty so extreme it shocked even 16th century Eastern Europe. Insanity ran through the family like a thread of black silk. She was educated to a level that most men of her time never achieved. She read and wrote in Hungarian, Latin, German, and Greek. She married at the age of 15 to Ferenc Nadasdy, a Hungarian count who was widely known as the Black Knight of Hungary for his battlefield cruelty against the Ottoman Turks. Ferenc reportedly taught his young bride his own preferred methods of torturing prisoners, including the use of paper soaked in oil placed between a captive's toes and then set on fire. For the next 29 years, Ferenc was away at war for most of the year. Elizabeth managed his estates, raised 4 children, and, according to the surviving testimony, began torturing the young women employed in her households as servants. The accusations, when they finally surfaced after Ferenc's death in 1604, described cumulative horrors that has rarely been matched in European criminal history. Young female servants were beaten, bitten, stuck with needles, burned with red-hot iron rods, and held in cages of spikes designed to slowly pierce them. Some were sewn together. Some were dragged outside in winter, drenched in water, and frozen alive. The most famous accusation, that Elizabeth bathed in the blood of virgins to preserve her youth, did not appear in any contemporary document. It was a folk legend that emerged decades later. What did appear in the trial testimony of her servants and accomplices was an estimate of the death toll. One witness claimed to have personally counted 650 victims in a single book kept by Elizabeth herself. Other witnesses estimated 30 to 50 deaths per year over a span of 2 decades. The actual number probably falls somewhere in between, although historians remain skeptical, noting that Elizabeth's enormous estates were coveted by powerful enemies who had political reasons to exaggerate. In 1610, the Hungarian Palatine, Count György Thurzo, raided Chaktitz Castle and reportedly found the bodies of murdered girls in various stages of mutilation. 4 of Elizabeth's servants were tried, convicted, and executed by burning. Elizabeth herself, as a member of the high nobility, could not be publicly tried without political consequences for the Hungarian crown. She was instead walled into a single room of her own castle, with only narrow slits for food and air. She lived there for 3.5 years. She died on August 21st, 1614, alone in that walled room. Her last known words, scrawled on a scrap of paper that survived for centuries, were a complaint that her hands were cold. She was 54 years old. That was Elizabeth Báthory, the Countess whose castle ate the women who worked in it. Born in the Palace of Placentia, in Greenwich, England, in 1516, Mary Tudor was the only surviving legitimate child of King Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. She was an intelligent, pious, and physically fragile girl who was raised believing she would one day be Queen of England. Until the age of 17, when her father divorced her mother, declared her illegitimate, and threw her out of the line of succession to marry Anne Boleyn and produce an heir who would never come. Mary spent the next 20 years in a state of internal exile. She was forbidden to see her mother on her mother's deathbed. She was forced to serve in the household of her half-sister Elizabeth, the infant daughter of the woman who had replaced her mother. She was harassed by her father's officials. She nearly broke down. She held on to two things: her Catholic faith and her conviction that the crown of England was rightfully hers. When her father died in 1547, the throne went to her younger half-brother Edward VI, a sickly Protestant boy who reigned for 6 years before dying at 15. When Edward died in 1553, the Protestant nobility tried to install Lady Jane Grey, a teenage cousin, as queen in order to keep England Protestant. Mary, with the support of the English people, raised an army and rode into London to claim her birthright. Lady Jane Grey was beheaded. Mary I became the first queen regnant in English history. She was 37 years old. She had inherited a country that had been forcibly converted to Protestantism by her father and her brother. She intended to convert it back. In 1554, she married Philip II, the future King of Spain, and the most powerful Catholic monarch in Europe. The match was deeply unpopular with the English public, who feared Spanish domination. Within a year, she had revived the medieval heresy laws and begun systematically arresting, trying, and executing English Protestants who refused to renounce their faith. Between 1555 and 1558, 283 English men and women were burned alive at the stake for heresy. The condemned ranged from elderly bishops to teenage apprentices to a blind woman to a pregnant woman who gave birth inside the flames. The infant, after being saved by bystanders, was thrown back into the fire on the orders of the local sheriff. Mary's reign ended not in revolution but in illness. She suffered 2 false pregnancies, each one publicly announced and then humiliatingly retracted. Her husband returned to Spain. She died. Her half-sister Elizabeth, the daughter of Anne Boleyn, became queen the same day, restored Protestantism, and ruled for 44 years. Mary, within months of her death, was being called Bloody Mary in popular songs. That was Mary I, the queen who tried to save her country's soul and burned it instead. Now let us put these two women side by side. Category 1, body count. Elizabeth Báthory is connected to a death toll that estimates range from 80 to 650, with most historians settling somewhere between 100 and 300. Mary I burned 283 Protestants in 5 years, and is responsible for the deaths of perhaps 1,000 more in famine and rebellion. The edge in confirmable death toll is Mary, narrowly. Category 2, position of power. Báthory was a wealthy noblewoman with enormous estates, but no formal political role. Mary was a sovereign queen with the full authority of the English state behind her every act. The edge is Mary, by a continent. Category 3, method and brutality. Báthory. Alleged crimes were intimate, sadistic, and personal. She was reported to have personally tortured her victims with needles, burns, and bites. Mary's executions were juridical, ritualized, and public. Both methods are horrifying. The edge in pure personal cruelty is Báthory. The edge in scale of orchestrated cruelty is Mary. Category 4, historical accuracy. Báthory's reputation is built on testimony obtained from her servants under torture in a trial designed to discredit her family and seize her estates. Modern historians remain genuinely uncertain how many of the accusations against her are true. Mary's executions, by contrast, are extensively documented, with surviving court records, eyewitness accounts, and even illustrated woodcuts. The edge in confirmed atrocity is, decisively, Mary. Category 5. Cultural legacy. Báthory became the basis of countless vampire and witch myths across Eastern Europe. Some scholars believe she contributed to the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. Mary became Bloody Mary, the name still whispered in mirrors at sleepovers 4.5 centuries after her death. Both are immortal. Call this category a tie. So the categories split 2-2 with one tie. By a hair, the more historically devastating woman was Mary I. By legend, the more terrifying woman was Báthory. The verdict depends on what you count as evidence. Here is the wild card. What if these two had ever met? Imagine Elizabeth Báthory at the Tudor court in the 1550s. A foreign Hungarian countess, lavishly wealthy, surrounded by suspicious English ladies in waiting who reported every twitch. She would have been executed for witchcraft within 6 months, and Mary, with her religious zeal, would have personally signed the warrant. Now imagine Mary I as a Hungarian countess in 1600. No throne, no army, no clergy at her command. She would have spent her life in chapel, praying for the lost souls of Protestants. She might never have killed anyone at all. Each woman's evil was a product of the exact position she occupied. Strip away the position, and the evil dissolves. The verdict are from categories. Mary I wins. She killed more confirmed people. She held more genuine power. She used her formal authority as queen to inflict religious violence on her own kingdom. She was the more dangerous woman of the two. But here is the part that should disturb you. Elizabeth Báthory has become a folklore monster, the model for every vampire countess in fiction. Mary has become a children's mirror game. The two most powerful and terrible women in European history been reduced, by popular culture, to bedroom horror stories. The historical Mary, who actually ordered the burning of nearly 300 people, has been domesticated into a slumber party prank. The historical Báthory, whose crimes are still in dispute, has been mythologized into a creature of pure evil. Báthory was the legend. Mary was the law. The winner is Mary. The one who became the bloodier myth is Báthory. Next episode, Joseph Mengele versus Shiro Ishii, two doctors who became the most notorious war criminals in medical history. One worked in Auschwitz. The other ran Unit 731 inches China. Only one of them was ever prosecuted, and not for the crimes you would expect.